I was sitting in the restaurant, reflecting on my life. I've been through a lot of wild things. Wild might not be the right word. Strange, weird, different, those all fit. Maybe my life was normal. Maybe everyone had similar experiences, but it just wasn't talked about. No, it couldn't be, unless everyone had been in prison. I served time for a crime I committed. I took a man's life. I got 15 to life, but I'm out now. According to the judge, I had extenuating circumstances. So I got out in just 15 years, and with good behavior, I was released 5 years earlier than expected. 15 goddamn years for destroying the man I thought was raping my wife. If I knew what I know now, there probably wouldn't have been two people there at once if I couldn't just walk away. I am a man, and I had a lot of pride at the time. Let me explain life as I see it. People around us behave in certain ways, and we react to their actions. Gosh, that sounds silly. Let me give you some examples. All movie stars have sex and get married now and then. The movies themselves are all about sex. Now, television is all about sex. So when I'm in public, I look at every woman and think about sex. However, some women I wouldn't go within 10 feet of, well, unless you've been in prison for 15 years. And there are some women I'd almost go to jail for until I got away from reality. For today's youth, all this stuff and lifestyle is the norm. But for us slightly older people, especially those who have been out of the workforce for a while, it's sexy as hell and very embarrassing. I don't even know where to begin my story. I have enough information in my head to write a book. I will start, I think, with the story of my once beautiful marriage, which ended in divorce when I went to prison. Ella had been my wife for almost 10 years. I had just graduated from college and was a regular guy looking for a job. I showed up at one firm, and while I was waiting for an interview, I kept glancing at the receptionist. Damn, what a cute woman. At 22, I looked at women the way a younger guy would. They were girls, broads, chicks, or women. All of those words were interchangeable to me. I kept smiling at the receptionist, who turned out to be Ella. We struck up a conversation, and eventually I asked her out on a date. I got the date, but not the job. I found a job selling hardware. It was a well-paying job. I got both a salary and sales bonuses. Life was going pretty well for me. Fresh out of college, a girlfriend and a good job, I was on my way to a successful career in life. Just a few months later, I proposed to Ella, and we got married by the mayor of our town. I couldn't have been happier. We bought a nice house and started a family. A year later, we had a son, and 2 years after that, a daughter. As far as I knew, life was good. We had problems, but we also had good times. Our life went on just like all of our neighbors. We took care of the kids, took them on vacations, and had the usual neighborhood barbecues. I never suspected that my wife was anything but faithful and loving to me. I know I was faithful to her. I had many chances for affairs as I traveled a lot, but I did my best to be a loving husband and stay on track. I must admit it was hard at times, but I kept my pride and always put my family first. We decided to build a pool for the kids. Well, actually, it was for all of us. That's what I'm trying to say. I never expected this development. I thought we had a loving marriage, a good relationship. I must have been walking around in Neverland with my eyes closed. Ella seemed like a good wife and mother to me. We had problems and arguments, of course, just like any other married couple we knew. Even 15 years later, I still can't get over it. Where the hell did I go wrong? We installed a pool and enjoyed it. The children, who were 7 and 9 years old at the time, were in the pool all the time. Ella and I would go there after dark, and we would do it in the water. After the first couple of times, Ella decided she needed to put up a fence so the neighbors wouldn't see us while we were in the pool. I started putting up the fence the next day, installing the fence posts. I knew it would take a week to install on my own, so I left all the tools I would need, like a wheelbarrow and shovels. The only tools I put away were hand and power tools in case it rained. I had to go out of town for a couple of days and told Ella that I would finish the fence when I got back. As usual, she got mad at me, saying that I never stay at home like other husbands. I explained to her for the 100th time that I was a salesman and had to travel. It was my job. What I didn't know then was that those trips would be the end of everything I thought was solid and true in my life. When I came back from that trip, everything had changed. My world was about to be turned upside down, and I would end up paying the price for my ignorance, pride, and misplaced trust. She yelled at me, telling me that I should be at home like other husbands, staying at home to protect my family. She always said things like that to piss me off. I told her that if anyone tried to attack her, we had a gun in the nightstand next to the bed. What was a guy to do? A lot of men traveled for work. Did their wives always complain? Maybe I should get a job where I don't have to travel. I'll talk to her about it after this trip. The money will be a lot less, but at least I'll be home. That might satisfy her. In the morning, I kissed her goodbye and told her I would try to be home in 2 days. I told her to take care of herself and to call me if she needed anything. She told me not to worry and that she might not be home. Again, she played the woe is me game, and then I left on my journey. The first night, I was to stay only 40 miles from home. I usually stayed in a motel to get a quick start on the next day. After our fight, I decided to surprise her by going home and making the extra drive the next morning. By the time I got home, it was getting dark, and I pulled up in front of the house. There was a strange car parked across the street. Being a salesman, I always noticed things like that. The lights in the house were off except for the lamp in the living room. I turned the knob, but the storm door was locked, so I went to the back door by the pool. I heard Ella screaming and rushed to the back porch. There, I saw Ella being assaulted by a stranger. I heard her screams, but I didn't listen to what she was saying. I grabbed a shovel, ran out to the pool deck, and hit the assailant as hard as I could with the shovel on the back of his head and neck. I must have hit him 3 times, but I don't know exactly. He rolled off Ella onto his back, and there was blood everywhere. Ella started screaming again. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" I think she was in shock as I ran into the house and called 911. Ella was screaming and crying until the paramedics and police arrived. There were 2 ambulances there. One took the assailant, and the other took Ella. The police officers told me they would have to handcuff me, take me to the station, and interrogate me. I said I understood, but needed to know where my children were. The officer said he had asked my wife if anyone else was there, and she said our kids were spending the night at her sister's house. They were planning on being there. I thought, thank goodness they weren't home. God knows what might have happened if they had been there. Ella's sister Alina was a real beauty. She was 2 years younger than Ella and was always going out on dates. She was stocky with a pretty face. When she was around me, she was always flirting. I could have fallen in love with her very easily. Now looking back, I think I picked the wrong sister. Funny how a nice girl like Alina never married, at least not in the 10 years I knew her. When we got to the station, the officers took me into a room and started asking me questions. I told them everything I knew and then said I would answer any other questions they might have. I started by telling them how Ella and I had a fight, and I decided to surprise her by going home. When I saw the man assaulting her, my adrenaline just went into overdrive. I grabbed a shovel and started hitting him with it. The whole time, Ella was screaming. I mentioned that the night before, Ella had said she thought I should be home at night to protect her and the kids, so that was the first thing I thought when I saw the intruder. The officers asked me if I knew the man, and I said I did not. "Have you ever seen him before?" the officer asked. I told them he seemed a little familiar, but I couldn't identify him. That's when I got the shocking news. I had been arrested for second-degree murder. I couldn't believe it. I told the officer it was impossible. I came home and found a man attacking my wife, and I stopped the assault, and now I was being arrested. "We just got back from talking to your wife, and we took her statement," the officer said. "She wasn't assaulted, it was her boyfriend, and they were having consensual sex." God, no, that can't be true. Ella is my loving wife. We have 2 children together. She hasn't had an affair, I cried. The officer looked at me and said, "Boy, I'm really sorry for you, but you killed a man tonight. You took the law into your own hands, and now you will have to stand trial for his death." I stopped talking. My mind stopped working. I had no idea what was going to happen next. The officers handcuffed me and took me to a cell and then removed the handcuffs. The next morning, I was taken to court for arraignment and bail. I was ordered to pay $1 million and was charged with second-degree murder. That meant I would have to find $100,000 to get out on bail. The only way was to cash out our savings and maybe take out a second mortgage. I called the house and got only an answering machine. I was never bailed out. Ella never returned my calls and never spoke to me alone again at all. The next time I saw her was in court when she literally testified against me. They say a wife shouldn't testify against her husband, but Ella volunteered. The Alan I killed was her boyfriend. It looked like she was going to ask me for a divorce and marry Alan. I couldn't prove I didn't know Alan. How do you prove you don't know someone? Alan had been working with Ella for the past few months. He was divorced and started pursuing Ella. Apparently, she fell in love with him and was going to marry him. They'd been together for the last few months. The prosecution made a case against me for revenge, saying that I knew about the affair and wanted to get even, and I found my chance. I had no defense, especially since my wife was acting as a witness for the prosecution. I was doomed. Ella must have really hated me for killing Alan. She wouldn't even let me see my kids. The only person who came to see me was my brother. Ray was the one who told me everything he'd learned about Ella and the kids. I was going to serve a minimum sentence of 20 years to life. For the first couple of years, Ray came by every few months to let me know what was going on. He told me that Ella had sold the house and she and the kids had moved, but where exactly he didn't know. He said that as far as he knew, she had even managed to turn the kids against me. He never saw them after the move. Let's face it, they were 7 and 9 years old at the time. Ray mentioned that he and his family were moving to Florida, and when I got out to visit him, that was the last time I saw him. Before I was sent upstairs, my former supervisor visited me. He told me that he thought I had been framed and acted as a witness to my character. He was a decent man. Of course, he had to write in my report that he had to let me go. Legal stuff, you know how it is? I asked for one favor. I had a 401k savings account that I had been contributing to for 10 years for retirement. I asked him if he could just keep it with him and not tell Ella or her lawyers that I had it. He said that if they found out any other way, he would have to give up the paperwork, but he wouldn't bring it up. He wished me the best under the circumstances and went on his way. I need to tell you about Alina, Ella's sister. She never visited me, but she kept in touch with me for a while. She wrote to me and told me about my children and how they were doing. According to her, Ella tried to turn the kids against me, but every chance she got, she tried to tell them what a nice guy I was. She always signed her letters, "Love, Alina." Damn, I wish that was true. She wrote to me for about 8 years. Then the letters stopped. I don't know if it had something to do with my transfer to another prison. Oh, I forgot. They like to call it a correctional facility. I started at Mansfield Correctional Facility, and then when Mansfield was closed, I was transferred to Orient Prison. At the same time I was at Mansfield, there was another Dan Jones who was transferred to Lucasville Prison in southern Ohio. I thought maybe he had started getting my mail. It was a joke because we had our own private number. In the last letters I received from Alina, 8 years before, she told me that Ella had sold the house and moved in with her. The kids were doing well, but Ella got multiple sclerosis, a terrible muscle disease. They only gave her a few years. I know I was angry with her, but seeing her fade away was something I wouldn't wish on her. Besides, she was still the mother of my children. Alina told me not to write to her because if Ella found out she was in touch with me, it would be very unpleasant. Now I was out of prison, back in my old hometown, sitting down with a cup of coffee and breathing in the free air. Let's see. My son would be 24 and my daughter 22. I had no idea what they looked like, had never seen a picture of them in the last 7 years since Alina stopped writing to me. Now, whenever I saw a young man passing by, I always asked about my children. I hated Ella for what she had done to me and our family, and I was afraid to see her because I would end up in jail again. I couldn't hate my children. Parents don't do that. Maybe they never knew the real story and think their father is a murderer. Now it's time to plan for the rest of your life. Chapter 2, What's Next? I found a room in one of the boarding houses in the old neighborhood. I figured I'd better go visit my old boss if he was still alive and see if Ella had found out about my 401k retirement plan. I never told her about it. I might have a few bucks on top of the couple hundred I made in prison. Hell, when no one would give me money, I made it and spent it. Lucky I had some left over. I walked into the store. It looked very different. The shelves were stocked with new products, and the layout had changed. I wondered if my old boss was still around or if someone else had taken over. The familiar scent of hardware and tools brought back memories of the time I had spent working there. I walked up to the counter and saw a young man behind it, someone I didn't recognize. "Excuse me, is Mr. Thompson still here?" I asked, hoping my old boss was still running the place. The young man looked up and smiled. "Mr. Thompson? Yeah, he's still here. He's in the back office. Do you want me to call him for you?" I nodded, feeling a bit anxious about the upcoming conversation. The young man disappeared into the back, and a few moments later, Mr. Thompson came out. He looked older, a bit grayer, but his eyes still had that sharp, observant look I remembered. "Dan, is that you?" he asked, squinting slightly as he recognized me. "Yeah, Mr. Thompson, it's me," I replied, feeling a wave of nostalgia wash over me. Mr. Thompson walked over and shook my hand warmly. "It's good to see you, Dan. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing, sir. I wanted to talk to you about my 401k. I was hoping it was still intact," I said, getting straight to the point. Mr. Thompson's expression softened. "I kept it safe for you, Dan. I knew you'd need it when you got out. Let me get the paperwork for you." He disappeared into the back office again, and I felt a sense of relief, knowing that at least some part of my old life was still secure. A few minutes later, he returned with a folder and handed it to me. "Here you go, Dan. Everything is in order. If you need any help with it, just let me know," he said kindly. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. This means a lot to me," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. As I left the store, I felt a mix of emotions. I had a bit of money to start over, but I still had a long way to go to rebuild my life. I needed to find my kids, to explain my side of the story, and hopefully to mend the broken pieces of my past. I asked the clerk if Jim owned the store, and he said he did and was in the back room. I told the guy that I was an old friend of his and asked if I could surprise him. The guy looked me over from head to toe a few times and told me to go inside. When I entered the office, an elderly man looked up at me and shouted, "Jesus, Dan, they told me you were dead." I looked up at my old friend and said, "No, I'm very much alive, as you can see. How are you, Jim?" "It's good to see you. You're the first friendly face I've seen in 15 years. I was there for about an hour, and we got to talking. He told me about all the changes in the business and how his family was growing. He even offered me a job at the store. He said that no one was as good at selling hardware as I was. He would like to offer me a job in the field, but because of my background, I probably can't get one right now." I asked him about my 401k contribution, and he said that no one had ever asked about it, and that it had been sitting there for the last 15 years, gaining interest. He said he was going to leave it alone and contact my kids when I retired and give them the money. I asked him to find out how much it was worth because I needed the funds to get back on my feet. He asked me to stop by on Monday next week when he would have information for me and I could start my new sales position. He liked to put it that way rather than job. We shook hands and I headed for the exit of the store. I wondered why he thought I was dead. I'll have to ask my parole officer about it next week. He'll be happy to hear that I found a job so quickly. He was a pretty nice guy, but I've heard he's pretty strict when it comes to parolees. I headed to Alina's last known address. Damn, she was such a nice woman. I wondered if Ella lived with her and what was wrong with my kids. I was really nervous as I rode the bus to their street. The neighborhood didn't look like it had changed at all. Some of the houses were a little dilapidated, and others had been spruced up with new siding and windows. I had seen Alina's house before and had to stop before I approached it. I didn't know how to approach it. What if Ella opened the door? I nervously walked up the stairs and knocked on the door. A woman's voice came from inside the house. "Wait, I'll be right there." It sounded like Alina. I had my back turned to the door and was looking outside when I heard a voice behind me say, "Can I help you?" through the door. I turned around and saw Alina looking at me. Oh my God, Danny, is that really you?" She opened the door. She came out and hugged me. She started crying. Other than the fact that she had aged a little, she looked as good as ever. I know I shouldn't say this, but those big soft breasts pressing against me started to turn me on a little. "Oh my God, Danny, they said you were killed in prison. God, I'm so happy to see you." She continued to hug me. "Come in, Danny, please come in." She seemed to calm down a little. Before I went in, I asked her about Ella. I didn't want to go in if she was there. "Danny, Ella died 2 years ago from multiple sclerosis. Please come in and we can talk about everything." I was saddened when I heard this. Even though I hated her actions, she was my wife for 10 years and the mother of my children. What about my children? I had many questions as I entered Alina's house. As soon as I entered the living room, Alina turned and hugged me again. She laid her head on my chest and cried. For the next few moments, I just hugged her. God, she was so soft, so warm, my eyes started to water. "Danny," she always called me Danny. "Do you want something to eat or drink?" "Alina, I'm not hungry right now, but coffee would be nice. I have so many questions, and I'd like to just sit with you over a cup of coffee and talk." She poured each of us a cup. She remembered that I took it black and said we'd be more comfortable in the living room. When we put the coffee on, she asked me to wait a minute because she needed to check on Danny. I thought for a second and asked, "Danny? Who's Danny, Alina?" Alina looked at me and said, "Oh my goodness, I forgot you didn't know. Danielle is your granddaughter. We call her Danny. Beth named her after you." I got up and followed Alina into the bedroom where the sweetest little girl I had ever seen was sleeping. Tears immediately came to my eyes. Summer in a prison riot. Alina looked at me, her eyes filled with both relief and lingering sorrow. "We were devastated. We thought we'd lost you for good, Danny. We even had a small memorial service for you." I was stunned. "So that's why everyone thought I was dead. But why didn't you try to contact me at the Orient facility?" She sighed. "We did try, but when we didn't get any responses, we assumed the worst. We didn't have any other contact information, and the prison system isn't always forthcoming with updates. It was like you just vanished." I shook my head, trying to process everything. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that, Alina. It must have been incredibly hard." She nodded. "It was, but we managed. And now you're back. We can finally set things right." I looked around the cozy living room, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and sadness. "What about Beth and my son? Where are they now?" Alina smiled. "Beth and her husband live not too far from here. Your son, Mike, moved out of state for work, but he visits often. They both have families of their own now. They turned out to be wonderful parents." A wave of emotions washed over me. I had missed so much of their lives. "Do they know I'm out?" "No, they don't. They still believe you're gone. I didn't want to give them false hope in case we couldn't find you." "Well, I need to see them. I need to explain everything and try to make amends." Alina reached out and took my hand. "You will, Danny. But first, you need to take some time to adjust. You've been through a lot, and it will take time for everyone to process this." I nodded, knowing she was right. "Thank you, Alina, for everything. You've done so much for our family." She smiled warmly. "We're family, Danny. We stick together." Just then, a little voice called out from the bedroom. "Grandma, I want my teddy bear." Alina laughed. "That's Danny for you. She always needs her teddy bear for nap time." She got up and went to fetch the toy, leaving me alone with my thoughts for a moment. As I sat there, I realized how much I had lost, but also how much I still had. The love of my family, the chance to reconnect with my children and grandchildren, and the opportunity to start over. It was more than I could have hoped for. Alina returned with little Danny in her arms, the child's eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Peace, Grandpa," she said, holding out her teddy bear. "Peace, Danny," I replied, my heart swelling with love and hope. As we sat together, talking and planning for the future, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. Despite all the pain and loss, I had found my way back to the people who mattered most. And that was all that mattered. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, and my heart was overwhelmed with a mixture of relief and joy. My daughter Beth had recognized my voice immediately, and her tears of joy mirrored the emotions I felt but couldn't fully express. It had been so long since I'd heard her voice, and now she was calling me Daddy again. I knew I had a second chance with my family. The next day, I prepared to visit Alina's house again, feeling both excitement and nervousness. I had missed so much of their lives, and I wasn't sure how they would react to seeing me. I hoped for the best, but braced myself for the unexpected. When I arrived at Alina's, I saw Beth standing on the porch, looking more mature than I remembered, but still my little girl. As soon as she saw me, she ran towards me and threw her arms around me. We both started crying, holding each other tightly, not wanting to let go. It felt like time had stopped, and we were the only two people in the world. "I've missed you so much, Daddy," Beth whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I've missed you too, honey. Every single day," I replied, my voice trembling. We walked inside, and there was Mike, my son, standing awkwardly but with a smile on his face. He had grown into a handsome young man. He approached me and shook my hand before pulling me into a hug. "It's good to see you, Dad," he said quietly. "It's good to see you too, Mike. I'm so proud of you," I said, feeling tears welling up again. We all sat down in the living room, and Alina brought us some coffee. We spent the next few hours catching up, sharing stories, and laughing. It felt like a dream, sitting there with my family, talking like we used to, before everything fell apart. Beth told me more about her life with Ed, how they had built a good life together, and how they were raising little Danny. She showed me pictures of their wedding and their home, and I could see the happiness in her eyes as she talked about her family. Mike shared his own success story, how he had built his computer business from the ground up, and how proud he was of his little family. I was introduced to pictures of his wife, Rachel, and my grandson, Mike Jr. They looked so happy, and I felt a surge of pride for all they had accomplished. As the day went on, we all grew more comfortable. The initial tension had melted away, replaced by a sense of belonging and love. It was as if the years of separation had never happened. We were a family again. That evening, we sat down for dinner together. Beth and Alina had cooked up a feast, and we enjoyed a meal filled with laughter and love. It was the best meal I had had in years, not just because of the food, but because of the company. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with coffee, Beth said, "Daddy, we need to talk about something important." I nodded, feeling a bit anxious. "Of course, honey. What is it?" "We want you to move in with us, at least until you get back on your feet. We have plenty of room, and little Danny would love to have her grandpa around," she said, looking at me with hopeful eyes. I was taken aback. "I don't want to be a burden, Beth. You've already done so much." "You're not a burden, Dad. You're family. We missed out on so many years, and we want to make up for that," Mike added, his voice sincere. I looked at them, my heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you. I would love that, more than anything." And so it was decided. I moved in with Beth and Ed, and my life slowly began to rebuild itself. Being with my family gave me a new sense of purpose and joy. I spent my days helping Ed with the house, playing with little Danny, and reconnecting with my children. I even started working at Jim's store again. It felt good to be useful and to be back in the community. People were surprised to see me, but most were supportive, knowing the story of my wrongful conviction and the time I had lost. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. Each day was a gift, a chance to build new memories with my family. I found peace in the little moments, in Danny's laughter, in Beth's hugs, in Mike's conversations. Looking back, I realized that despite everything, I had been given a second chance. A chance to love and be loved, to make amends, and to live the life I had always wanted. And I was determined to make the most of it. Then I hung up the phone and went into my room, where tears of joy streamed down my face. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of the reunion that awaited me. I got up and went out for a walk, needing something to calm my nerves. The reality of seeing my family for the first time in 15 years, including my 2 grandchildren, daughter-in-law and son-in-law, felt surreal. And then there was Alina. What wasn't to love about Alina? She was beautiful, happy, loving, and caring. She had taken care of her sick sister, raised my children, and was now helping my grandchildren and me. She was 1 in a million, and yet I had married her sister. Life had a strange sense of humor. The next morning, the phone rang in the hall. I answered it, and it was Alina. She said she hadn't thought about the fact that I didn't have a car and offered to pick me up around 3:45 p.m. It was Friday, and everyone had decided it would be fun since no one had to work the next day. Alina arrived just in time. I had already gone out and bought a new shirt and pants, and even picked out a new pair of shoes. I felt like I was going to a job interview that I desperately wanted to ace. Alina honked her horn, even though I was sitting on the porch swing waiting for her. I knew she was doing it on purpose. I smiled at her as I walked to the car. As we drove, my nerves intensified. I hadn't seen my children in 15 years, and now they were adults. When we arrived at the house, I felt almost afraid to get out of the car. A young woman came running down the stairs, screaming, "Daddy! Daddy!" Beth wrapped her arms around me, crying, "I missed you so much, Daddy, and then we thought you were dead." I clung to her, hugged her tightly, and cried with her. By then, everyone was on the porch. My son Mike came down and hugged me too. "Hi, Daddy. It's so good to see you." I hugged him, and we all went into the house for introductions. Beth introduced me to her husband, Ed, who extended his hand and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir, and just so you know, I'm very fond of your daughter." Beth tearfully took Danny in her arms and said, "You met Danny yesterday. She was named after you, Daddy. Her name is Danielle." She handed me Danny, who put her arms around my neck and kissed me on the cheek. I did the same and handed her back to Beth. Mike said, "Dad, I want you to meet the love of my life. This is Rachel." I asked if I could give her a hug. She answered, "I won't break, Daddy, and you can hug me anytime you want." She called me Daddy as I wrapped my arms around her and hugged her tightly. I looked down, and a little boy looked up at me and said, "Hi, Daddy. My name is Mikey. I'm 3 years old, but I'll be 4 next month." I picked him up, gave him a hug, and said, "It's really nice to meet you, Mikey." He leaned over and whispered in my ear, "We're going to throw a party for you. We should go to the patio." I whispered back, "Okay, Mikey, you drive." We all went out to the patio, where a big poster hung that said, "Welcome home, Dad," signed by everyone. Mike must have taken the time to make it on his computer. I sat down in my chair and cried. All these years, I had no one. Now my family was here, and I couldn't have been happier. We talked about old times, laughed, and cried together. We even talked a little about Ella. I knew the kids loved their mom to the end, but hated what she had done to me. Alina asked Mike and Ed to take the boxes and bags of my stuff upstairs. They brought some boxes and 2 bags of trash. Alina said it was stuff left over from the kids, old books, and some bowling trophies. They took out different objects, and I told them stories about each one. After listening, they asked if they could keep some of the items, finding new meaning in them once they learned why I had kept them. The trash bags were filled with my old clothes. I asked Alina where all my clothes had gone, as I knew I had more than 2 bags worth. She said Mike went through everything and took what he could use, and Ed took some stuff for his job as a welder. I looked at Ed and asked if he used my old clothes for welding. He looked at me strangely and replied, "No, sir. I cut them up and used them as rags." Everyone started laughing. Apparently, my clothes were outdated. I reached into my bag and pulled out a silk Hawaiian shirt, blue with yellow flowers on it. Maybe this would even make a good rag? I showed him the shirt and 3 others. Ed laughed and replied, "No, sir. Silk, viscose, and nylon don't make good rags." I chuckled and said, "I see I have 3 pairs of jeans left." Alina then handed me another box filled with old photos and letters. I spent the next hour going through them, sharing memories and stories with everyone. Each picture and letter brought back a flood of emotions, and I realized how much I had missed. As the evening went on, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My family was together, and I was surrounded by love. I had been given a second chance, and I was determined to make the most of it. I was speechless, staring at Alina as she bared her soul to me. Her words struck a chord deep within me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope and love. "Alina, you have no idea what this means to me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I thought I lost everything, but here you are, showing me that there's still something worth holding on to." She smiled warmly, her eyes shining with tears. "Danny, you never lost everything. You just had to go through a rough patch to see what truly matters. Now that you're back, we can make up for lost time." I reached out, cupping her face in my hands. "Alina, I want to be with you. I don't have much to offer right now, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make you happy." She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing as a single tear slid down her cheek. That's all I ever wanted, Danny, just you. We sat there, holding each other, as the weight of the past years began to lift. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild and find happiness once more. Eventually, we got up and finished cleaning the house, our movements synchronized as if we had done this 1,000 times before. There was a comfortable silence between us, filled with unspoken promises and mutual understanding. As Alina drove me home, the city lights flashing past us, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. We pulled up to my place, and she turned to me with a smile. "I'll see you tomorrow?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. I nodded. "Definitely. I have a feeling this is just the beginning for us, Alina." Well, she leaned over and kissed me softly, her lips lingering on mine. "Good night, Danny." "Good night, Alina," I replied, stepping out of the car and watching as she drove away. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her and the future that suddenly seemed so bright. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I was determined to rebuild my life, not just for myself, but for Alina and my children. Over the next few weeks, I started working at Jim's store, getting back into the rhythm of a normal life. Every evening, Alina and I would spend time together, talking, laughing, and slowly falling into a routine that felt incredibly natural. One night, as we sat on her porch, Alina turned to me with a serious expression. "Danny, I've been thinking, why don't you move in here with me? We have plenty of space, and it would be nice to have you close." I was taken aback by her offer. "Are you sure, Alina? I don't want to impose." She shook her head. "You're not imposing. I want you here, Danny. We can take it slow, but I think it's time we start building our future together." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Okay, Alina, let's do it. Let's build our future together." Moving in with Alina felt like the final step in leaving my past behind. We merged our lives seamlessly, and soon it was as if we had always been together. My children visited often, and we spent weekends as a family, creating new memories and strengthening our bonds. One evening, after a particularly joyful family dinner, Alina and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. I turned to her, my heart swelling with gratitude and love. "Alina, I never thought I'd find happiness again, but you've given me more than I ever imagined. I love you." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the setting sun. "I love you too, Danny, and I'm so glad you're here with me." In that moment, I realized that despite the hardships and the years we lost, we had found something truly special. Our love had stood the test of time and adversity, and now we were finally free to live the life we had always dreamed of. The past was behind us, and the future stretched out before us, filled with endless possibilities, and with Alina by my side, I knew I could face anything. "I am her fiancé, and I suggest you leave now. Alina has moved on, and so should you." Brad's face contorted with anger. "Fiancé, huh? We'll see about that." He tried to push past me, but I stood firm. Alina stepped up behind me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Brad, it's true. Dan and I are together now. It's best you leave." Seeing Alina standing beside me, her resolve clear, seemed to deflate Brad's bravado. He glared at me, then turned his gaze to Alina. "Fine, if that's what you want." "It is," she replied calmly. Brad walked away, muttering under his breath. I closed the door and turned to Alina, who was visibly relieved. "Thank you, Danny. I didn't want things to get messy." I pulled her into a comforting embrace. "It's over now, Alina. He won't bother us again." The day moved on peacefully. We spent time talking about our future, making plans for the days ahead. The warmth of our new relationship wrapped around us like a comforting blanket, and I felt more at home than I had in years. As evening approached, Alina suggested we visit the children to share our news. "I think it's time we told them about us, don't you?" "Absolutely," I agreed. "They should be the first to know." We drove over to Beth's house. The moment we walked in, we were met with curious looks from the family gathered there. Beth's eyes widened when she saw us holding hands. "Daddy, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with both surprise and anticipation. Alina squeezed my hand, giving me the courage to speak. "Beth, Mike, everyone, Alina and I have decided to be together. We're engaged." A stunned silence followed my announcement. Then Beth broke into a wide smile. "Oh, Daddy, that's wonderful!" She rushed over to hug us both. "I'm so happy for you two." Mike approached more cautiously, but his grin was just as wide. Dad, that's great. Annalena, welcome to the family officially. The kids were genuinely happy for us. We spent the evening celebrating, with Beth and Mike sharing stories and memories. The atmosphere was light and filled with laughter, a stark contrast to the heaviness of my past. Later that night, back at Alina's house, we settled into bed, exhausted but happy. Today was perfect, I whispered, holding her close. It was, she agreed, resting her head on my chest. I can't wait for all the tomorrows we have together. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. The future was bright, and I had a loving family and an incredible woman by my side. The next few days flew by in a blissful blur. Alina and I made plans for a small, intimate wedding. We wanted to keep it simple, surrounded only by our closest family and friends. The excitement of a new beginning filled our hearts and home. One afternoon, as we were going through some old photos, Alina found a picture of us from a family barbecue years ago. We were laughing, a candid shot capturing the genuine affection we had for each other, even back then. I always loved this picture, she said, showing it to me. Even then, we looked like a perfect match. I smiled, my heart swelling with love for her. We were always meant to be, Alina. It just took us a while to realize it. The day of our wedding arrived, a beautiful sunny day with a gentle breeze. We exchanged vows in Alina's garden, surrounded by blooming flowers and the loving gazes of our family. As we said our vows, I could see the tears of joy in Alina's eyes, reflecting my own. I promised to love you, cherish you, and stand by you for the rest of my life, I vowed, my voice steady with conviction. And I promise to love you, support you, and be your partner in all things, Alina replied, her voice filled with emotion. We sealed our vows with a kiss, and as we turned to face our cheering family, I knew that this was the beginning of the happiest chapter of my life. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Beth and Mike shared stories of our family, making everyone laugh and cry with their memories. Alina and I danced together, lost in our own world, feeling the love and support from everyone around us. As the night came to a close, Alina and I stood together, watching the stars. "This is just the beginning, Danny," she whispered, her head resting on my shoulder. "I know," I replied, kissing her forehead, "and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." In that moment, I realized that everything I had gone through led me to this point. The struggles, the heartache, and the time spent apart had all been worth it to find my way back to Alina. Our love had withstood the test of time, and now we had a lifetime ahead of us to enjoy it. And so hand in hand, we walked into our future, ready to face whatever came our way, knowing that together we could overcome anything. I'm Alina's boyfriend. I was imprisoned for killing a man who molested my woman. I'm ready to come back to protect Alina. Do you understand? Brad glared at me, his jaw tight. "No woman is worth going to jail over. Tell Alina it's over between us, and we'll see each other again." And with that, he left. Alina emerged from the bedroom, concern etched on her face. What did Brad say? I knew she had overheard, but she wanted to hear it from me. He said, "You're not worth going to jail over." Alina looked relieved, but then asked, "Would you go to jail because of me?" I took a deep breath. "I'll be honest with you, Alina. Fighting someone to get you to go out with me, no, I wouldn't. Prison is a very unpleasant place. But if it was for your protection, then yes, I would go to prison in a heartbeat to protect you." She wrapped her arms around me and pressed herself against my chest. The phone rang and Alina answered it. It was Beth. She said she had called my apartment, but I wasn't there. She wanted to talk to me and asked if Alina knew where I might be. Alina handed me the phone. "Hi." "Hi, Daddy," Beth spoke in a very playful tone. "Did you spend the night at Aunt Alina's, Daddy? Did you sleep well?" I chuckled. "That couch is kind of small," she laughed. "I slept great, and no, I'm not telling you anything." "I'm still your father," I laughed. "What do you want, honey?" "Tomorrow we want to do something as a family. Mike and his family, Ed, me, and Danny. You, of course, and see if you can convince Annalena to go. We thought we could go to the zoo and get something to eat. We could fit everybody in 2 cars. What do you say, Daddy? Would you like to go?" "I'd love to go, honey, and I'll do my best to convince Annalena to go too. I'm sure I can persuade her to go." I laughed, and Alina slapped my arm playfully. I handed the phone back to Alina, who was still laughing. "Beth, we'd both love to come. I mean drive." She laughed at her own gaffe. "I'm sorry, Beth, but your father makes me laugh. He's so crazy. Well, take care of Daddy, Aunt Alina, and we'll see you tomorrow around noon. Do you want us to take Daddy back to your place, or do you think he'll sleep on your couch again tonight?" Beth laughed. "Bye, Beth. See you tomorrow," was all Alina said. It was noon, and Alina pulled my nice clothes out of the dryer. She said we should go shopping and get me some new clothes. She didn't want to be seen with me in my current clothes. I joked that all I needed was a peace symbol on a chain, and I could pass for an old hippie. "I don't have the money to buy clothes right now," I told her. "Don't worry about it," she replied. "You can pay me back if you want. I just like doing things for you. I'll pay you back every dime. I want to take care of you, not the other way around." She smiled. "I know you're a man, Danny. I understand that. But right now, it's my turn to take care of you." She got dressed and put on her bra. We went into different stores looking for clothes for me. I still felt a little funny about it, but I agreed. Alina said if it made me feel better, she could transfer the money to my card and I could pay for the clothes myself. That did make me feel better. This woman always knew just what to say to make me feel better. I realized that I needed her in my life. That night, we practically repeated what we had done the night before. We made love twice and had fun. We could put the average young newlyweds to shame. Life was finally good for me. The next morning, we got up early and had breakfast. Damn it, that woman could cook too. Even if it was only eggs, potatoes, and bacon, she must have done it with love. Everything tasted delicious. The kids arrived right on time. Beth said I could go with her, and Alina could go with Mike, and we'd switch on the way home. Beth smiled at me as I got into the car. She knew what I was thinking. "Dad, it'll only take half an hour." Of course, I pretended I didn't know what she was talking about. Ed asked where I'd gotten my new clothes. He welcomed me to the 21st century. I talked to them about various things, but spent most of my time talking to Danny, who sat in her car seat next to me. I loved this little girl, my granddaughter, whom I had only known for a couple of days. I told her that I would be taking her and Mikey for rides in the stroller at the zoo. I wanted to be around my grandchildren. I still couldn't believe it. My grandchildren. I bought a double stroller and pushed my grandkids around. I didn't let anyone else do my work. Every time we came to an animal exhibit, I went over and bought some food, peanuts, and other treats for the kids to feed the animals. Most of the food didn't make it to the animals, but the kids had fun with Grandpa. That's all I cared about. We went into a petting zoo, and I kept giving the kids food for the animals. They wanted to make sure each animal got something. Beth and Mike had cameras and were taking pictures like crazy. I looked up at the cameras, and I think everyone saw the happiness on my face. At that moment, I was probably the happiest person on earth. Life was good, especially with my family around. On the ride back, I was with Mike and Rachel. They really were a wonderful couple. I was very proud of him and told him so. We were having a nice conversation, and Mike asked me a question. "Do you have any good advice for me, Dad?" I thought for a moment and then told him, "Mike, always put your wife and child first in your life, before your job, money, or anyone else. But most of all, love them like there's no tomorrow. That's the best advice I can give you, son." I got a little emotional until Mikey started talking about the zoo. I promised him that we would go there again soon. Mike said, "How's your back, Dad?" He smiled, and so did Rachel. "Okay, Mike, why do you ask?" "When I slept on Annalina's couch, my back really hurt. I was just wondering if your back hurts." The beds in prison are pretty uncomfortable. I guess I'm used to them. I smiled, and so did Mike and Rachel. "We love you, Daddy, and hope the best for you," Mike said. We stopped at McDonald's to eat and let the kids play. I told Mike that I didn't mind treating everyone. We went inside, ordered our food, and found a table near the play area so we could keep an eye on the kids. The noise of children playing and laughing was music to my ears. It was the sound of normalcy, of life moving forward. Mike and I sat down with our food, and he looked at me thoughtfully. "Dad, do you ever regret what happened? I mean, going to prison and all?" I took a deep breath. "Mike, I regret the circumstances that led to it, and I regret not being there for you and Beth growing up. But what I did to protect your mother. At the time, I thought it was the right thing to do. If I had known the truth, well, things might have been different. Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. We understand, Dad. We know you did what you thought was right, and we're just glad to have you back now. We finished our meal and watched the kids play for a while longer before heading back home. The day had been a wonderful success, filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a brighter future. As we drove back to Alina's house, I couldn't help but reflect on how much my life had changed in such a short time. From the depths of despair and loneliness to the joy of being reunited with my family and finding love with Alina. It was almost too much to take in. That night, after everyone had gone home, Alina and I sat on the porch swing, holding hands and watching the stars. "Thank you for today," I said quietly. "It was perfect." "It was," Alina agreed, resting her head on my shoulder. "I'm so glad you're here, Danny. I've waited so long for this." "I know," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "And I promise I'll never leave you again." We sat there in comfortable silence, letting the peace of the night wash over us. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but with Alina by my side, I felt ready to face anything. The next few weeks flew by in a blissful blur. Alina and I settled into a routine, spending our days together, making plans for the future, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. I found a job at Jim's store, and it felt good to be working again, contributing to our life together. One evening, as we were sitting down to dinner, Alina looked at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Danny, I've been thinking, what do you say we go on a little adventure?" I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of adventure?" She smiled. "A road trip. Just the two of us. We can visit new places, see new things, and make some memories." I grinned. "That sounds perfect. Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere and everywhere," she replied, "as long as we're together." And so we packed our bags and set off on a journey, exploring new towns, meeting new people, and falling even more in love with each passing day. It was the adventure of a lifetime, and it brought us even closer together. Looking back, I realized that life had a funny way of working out. The twists and turns, the heartaches and joys, all led me to this moment. With Alina by my side and my family's love surrounding me, I finally felt whole again. As we drove down the open road hand in hand, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. And that was all I needed to be truly happy. Even their food was better than what I was used to. After eating, we headed home. Back at Alina's, we kissed everyone goodbye and promised to see them sometime during the week. Chapter 4, Starting Over. Alina and I went back to the house, feeling a little tired. Lots of sex, little sleep, and a day of walking around the zoo had taken its toll. I told Alina that I should probably go back to my apartment because I had to find out about my job the next day. Besides, we could both use some rest. "Do you really have to go, Danny? Can't you get dressed here in the morning and take the bus from here?" "I don't want to say goodbye to you, Danny. If you don't want to make love tonight, that's okay. We can still cuddle." "Alina, that's exactly my problem. You won't get any sleep, and you'll go to work tired and worn out. If I sleep with you tonight, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep my hands off you. I want to make love to you, and as tired as I am, I could make love to you right now." "Then let's do it, Danny. It's 7 o'clock, and if we start right now, we can go to bed and be ready for sleep by nightfall. You see, Danny, I want you as much as you want me now." We locked the doors, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Alina was right. By 10 o'clock, we were both sound asleep until the alarm clock rang in the morning. I got up first, showered, and put on my new clothes. Alina was already up and in the shower by then. When she came out to dry herself, I walked in, kissed her, and pulled her to me. I told her to have a good day at work and that I'd see her later. I walked to the bus stop and headed to the hardware store. Jim greeted me and invited me into his office. He told me that he had all sorts of information for me. For starters, I could get one of two jobs. I could work as a roadside salesman with great pay and incentives. The bail bond company saw no problem, as my jail time had nothing to do with money. In no time at all, I could get back on my feet. The second option was to work at the store. My pay would be about $9 an hour. That would be less than half of what I would make in sales. He encouraged me to sell large appliances, which helped a little. "Now about your 401k. It has over $140,000 accumulated in it," Jim said. My God, Jim, I had no idea it would be worth so much. How did this happen? According to the account administrator, your investment has been split several times, and you've left it to accumulate and earn interest. The downside is that if you take any of the money out, it will be taxed as well as a 10% penalty. You can get your money back in a few days. If you want to talk to him, here's his name and phone number. He's right down the street at the bank. As for the jobs, I need to know which one you will accept. We filled out the paperwork for the job. I also filled out the surety papers because Jim told me that if I was going to work with money, I needed to be a surety. So either way, I had to fill out the paperwork. I mentioned before that I wanted him to meet with a bank teller and see what my options were. I needed transportation, and I had to get my driver's license. On Tuesday, I was supposed to meet with my parole officer and tell him about my life. Jim and I decided that I could start work next Monday. That way, I would have time to get my driver's license and be able to make deliveries. I asked Jim if I could borrow his car or truck if I needed to take the test. He didn't mind and told me to just stop by when I needed it. He would even drive me there if I needed it. I didn't realize what a good friend and boss he was. He didn't turn his back on me like so many others. He was a man I respected, and I knew I would work hard for him. Apparently, he believed that too. In the evening, I took the bus back to Alina's house. I knocked on the door, and she opened it. What are you knocking for, you old geezer? Come on in. How was your day? I want to hear all about it. Tell me about your day first. I want to hear about your day too. Tell me everything, I replied. Okay, I'll go first. Everyone at work said they had never seen me so happy. They all wanted to know what had happened in the last few days to make me look and act as young and radiant as I do now. I told them that an old friend was back in town and I had spent some time with him. They said I should marry him if he could make me feel and look so good. Okay, now it's your turn. Let's see, where do I start? I got a job today. Jim gave me two options. I could work as a roadside salesman or in the store. The sales job pays better, but I have to travel. The store job pays less, but it's steady. I think I'll take the sales job. Oh, Danny, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. And about my 401k, it has over $140,000 in it. I can't believe it. Jim explained everything to me, and I'm going to see the account administrator tomorrow. Alina's eyes widened. That's incredible, Danny. You'll be back on your feet in no time. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty optimistic about the future. And Jim even said I could borrow his car to take my driver's test. Alina beamed at me. You're doing great, Danny. I knew you would. We spent the rest of the evening talking and making plans. It felt good to have a direction and a sense of purpose again. And with Alina by my side, I knew I could handle anything. The next few days flew by. I met with the account administrator and sorted out my 401k. I got my driver's license and started getting ready for my new job. Alina and I spent our evenings together, talking about the future and enjoying each other's company. It was the happiest I had been in years. Finally, Monday arrived, and I started my new job. The first day was a little overwhelming, but Jim was there to guide me. He was patient and supportive, and I quickly got the hang of things. By the end of the week, I felt like I was really making progress. Alina and I celebrated my first paycheck with a quiet dinner at home. We talked about our plans and dreams for the future. It felt good to have something to look forward to have a partner to share it with. Life was finally looking up, and I was grateful for every moment. With Alina by my side and my family's love and support, I knew I could face whatever challenges came my way. And as we sat there, holding hands and talking about the future, I knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful new chapter in our lives. I'll start next Monday, I said, explaining to Alina about my two job options, a big paycheck in traveling sales or $9 an hour working at a local store from 9 to 5. Which one did you take, Danny? She asked, curiosity shining in her eyes. First, let me tell you how my day went, and then I'll get to the rest, I teased, enjoying the anticipation. I didn't tell anyone, but I had a 401k that I never cashed out. The problem was that any money I took out of it would be subject to a penalty. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. Danny, what are you doing to me, making me wait for the story to continue? She protested playfully. It all ties together. Just bear with me. I got my driver's license today, too. Jim let me use the company truck to take the test. Would you believe it? I got my license with probation. Oh boy, a 45-year-old man with a suspended license. Now I need a car. When I finish our conversation, you and I will find me a little truck. Where did you get the money for this, Danny? You didn't cash in your entire pension, did you? Alina's concern was evident. Okay, Alina, let me explain. A few days ago, I had nothing but a few $100s, so all the money I have now is money that came out of the blue. I want to help my family, my children. I want to help you if I can. I need an automobile to get around. I don't like taking the bus. Alina waited patiently, but the curiosity was palpable. Come on, Danny. What did you do? Stop stressing yourself out already, she urged with a smile. I continued. I took $10,000 for each of my children. You have to realize that I haven't done anything for them in a long time. It's not a huge amount, but I'm sure they can both use it, and maybe Beth can stay home more with Danny if she wants to. I know Mike can use it for business or personal use. It will be up to him. I looked at Alina, who had tears in her eyes. She knew I had to do it. Pride means a lot to a man, and I wanted to give some of mine back. I took another $20,000 and opened a savings account in my name and yours. You must sign this card and return it to the bank. I want about $9,000 to buy myself a small truck to get around. The rest of the money is for anything you think we might need. So I had over $140,000 in my account. I left the rest for retirement. I can get it after I turn 59 and a half, no penalty. Alina looked at me with a mix of surprise and admiration. What about the job, Danny? Which one did you take, and what does it have to do with the savings account? I was going to apply for emergency funding and hope I could avoid a fine. Right now, the odds of me getting it are 50-50. I could save money on the taxable portion if I got married. My taxes would be cut by more than half. Alina looked at me strangely. Okay, let me get this straight. I want to make sure I understand everything. We've been making love for 3 days straight, and I think you're asking me to marry you to save on taxes, right? Yes, that's right. Alina, I've realized that I really do love you. Not just for the sex, which is wonderful, but for the inner person that Alina is. A woman with a big heart is who I love. As for the job, if you agree to marry me, I'll take the 9-to-5 job. That way I won't be away from you at night. If you don't want to marry me, then I can be away most of the time and make more money. My kids will still be here on weekends when I come home. Alina cried, You big guy. Of course I'd marry you. I'd even marry you so you could have your tax savings. God, I love you so much, Danny. With that, our future was set. I took the 9-to-5 job and bought myself a small used pickup truck for about $8,000. I gave each of my children $10,000. They both thanked me and told me they really appreciated the money and were going to put it to good use. Beth now works only 2 days a week, and on those 2 days, Alina looks after Danny. Ed has taken a job as an apprentice welder, and his income has increased a lot. Mike's business is booming. His computer business is in great demand, allowing him to give up any night work. He said he didn't want to be away from Rachel and Mikey, and I didn't blame him. As for Alina and I, we got married the following weekend. I had to put off going to my new job for a week. We went on a short honeymoon to the Poconos, sightseeing during the day and making love at night. That's one thing we never stopped doing, making love. We may have to cut back a little, though. Alina is 42 years old, but she's already carrying our child. Isn't life wonderful? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.